Good day. Just over 24 hours a day, the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, read his first full budget speech, possibly his last as well. A lot has been said. Political parties have had their say. Now, with the slight advantage of a bit of time perspective, what else can we say about the budget? Maybe we should start off by reminding ourselves what a budget really is. In the most elementary sense of the word, a budget speech is a summary of the government's expected revenue in the year that lies ahead from various sources, then layout of its spending priorities to various directions, and then the difference between the two, which we call the budget deficit. In a broader sense, it is a political document. It is a document read and tabled by a minister of the serving cabinet. But the expectations from a budget speech will obviously differ according to the stakeholder analyzing the speech. So let's try and do that. From the perspective of poorer members of society, the budget speech probably didn't hold much promise for them or much excitement. No real major gifts were made to the poor, taxes remained unchanged, the VAT rate was not lowered. So all in all, not all that inspiring. Having said that, the fact that tax rates or the tax tables have not been adjusted for fiscal drag does actually imply a bit of redistribution in favor of the poor. For a middle-income consumer, again, not much to write home about. Again, tax rates unchanged, indirectly slightly higher as a result of not making provision for fiscal drag. Petrol price up a bit, to be expected. Sin taxes up a bit, nothing unusual about that at all. If you look at the budget speech from the perspective of other departments and other politicians, probably not the most favorable one. I'm sure that civil servants feel rather disturbed about the minister's reference to, in essence, a bloated civil service and his intention to cut back on the wage bill. If I can quote Mr. Mboweni in the speech, the public wage bill is unsustainable. We want to reduce the compensation budget by 27 billion rand over the next 3 years. First of all, by allowing older public servants who want to do so to retire early and gracefully. And then limits on overtime, limits on bonus payments, limits on pay progression. The system of staffing our diplomatic missions is unjustified and should be reviewed urgently. And then interestingly, and perhaps symbolically, members of parliament will not be receiving a salary increase this financial year. How would an investor view the budget? For that matter, very importantly, a credit rating agency. And obviously the elephant in the room is Moody's. Well, it's difficult to read their minds. I think, first of all, nothing really would have surprised him in the budget. I think they might look fairly favorable at the frankness expressed by the minister. They would probably be very happy about some of the minister's references to Eskom. For instance, again, and these words have been repeated a few times, where he categorically says that we need fiscal prudence, and he says the SOEs pose very serious risks to the fiscal framework. Funding requests from SAA, SABC and the like have increased, with several requesting state support just to continue operating. Is it not about time the country asks the question, do we still need these enterprises? If we do, can we manage them better? If we don't need them, what should we do? We have no holy cows, he says, when it comes to our approach to state-owned enterprises. He carries on to say, putting money directly into Eskom in its current form is like pouring water into a sieve. I want to make it clear, the national government is not taking on Eskom's debt. Eskom took on the debt and must ultimately repay it. So Moody's and the like would probably welcome that kind of approach. They would probably not be too happy, and this is perhaps the biggest criticism against the budget, about the assumption that the economy is going to grow by 1.5% this year. That is probably somewhat higher than the general market expectation. If that turns out to be an overestimate, then obviously tax revenue collection will be lower than estimated, in which case the budget deficit will be higher than expected. And on that note, the budget deficit, government debt in particular, again something looked at by Moody's, the forecasts are that will reach around about 60% in the next 4 years. Now 60% turns out to be a rather important magical number all over the world. Anything more than 60% is deemed to be problematic. 60% isn't bad by international standards, but it's not just about the number, it's about the nature of that debt. And in our case, a great deal of the debt incurred over the last decade has been incurred to finance current spending. Wages, public sector wages, social grants, and of course throwing some of that money at ESCOM and the like. So that would also be perhaps a negative from Moody's perspective. All told, we note that this year this country will become a 5 trillion rand economy, government spending 1.8 trillion, and tax revenue 1.6 trillion, leaving a deficit of 240 billion. So, final verdict, possibly, probably, arguably, not a great news kind of budget, not a bad news kind of budget either. Fairly neutral, and in the current circumstances, that's perhaps not a bad thing. I think we have to see the budget speech and anything emanating from it and credit ratings as one big picture completed by the President's State of the Nation address a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, the election around the corner. The budget speech alone will possibly not bring about a downgrading. Other factors in conjunction with the budget speech might. ESCOM, will the lights stay on, outcome of the election, how are we going to deal with emerging evidence of state corruption and the like. Not a good budget for anybody really, not a good budget for consumers, not a good budget for government departments, but in a certain sense, that's not a bad thing. It was not a populist budget. And then of course, as a final comment, during the course of yesterday, we were told that the latest inflation rate is 4%. That is perhaps good news against the backdrop of austerity, because if inflation stays at that kind of level, 4%, there's a growing chance that interest rates will not increase. So I think we need to wait for the outcome of the election and see how events unfold during the course of the year. Will Mr. Mboweni still be finance minister after May? We'll have to see. Who will read the medium-term budget statement? We don't really know. But given the circumstances of a world economy in the doldrums, given the circumstances of misspending and corrupt spending and inappropriate spending over the last 10 years, this has been primarily a short-term, keep things ticking over kind of budget. Thank you.